Hello and welcome to this special edition of the Capitol Report on NTD Television. We hope everyone had a wonderful Thanksgiving Day. Recently, we had a chance to sit down with former Trump administration trade advisor Dr. Peter Navarro. Navarro has just published a new book called Taking Back Trump's America: Why We Lost the White House and How We'll Win It Back. He'll give us an inside look at the Trump administration, including its China policy, the trade deal with China, as well as personal decisions. Here's a look. Peter Navarro, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be with you, Steve.
Peter, in the book, you do mention that during the Trump administration, they could have been tougher on China.
Yeah.
If you could tell us, in a nutshell, how?
Sure. The book begins, Taking Back Trump's America begins in 2016 during the campaign. And what really distinguished candidate Trump from the 16 other Republicans winning was the MAGA agenda. It was a strong border. It was an end to endless wars. But one of the key issues was getting tough on communist China. And we did that to a large extent. I think one of the great achievements of Trump was to raise the consciousness of the American people to understand now, without any doubt, that China, communist China, is the single greatest existential threat to this country. Yet, in the last year, as we were hurtling towards Election Day, there were a number of things we could have done to be as tough on China as we should have been, where we stumbled. There was the issue of Huawei, there was the issue of TikTok, there was the issue of ZTE. I'm sure your viewers have heard those names all before. We were supposed to crack down on them, put Huawei and ZTE effectively out of business. And those punches got pulled. And the problem was always bad personnel inside the White House who were back-channeling the Chinese and acting, in my judgment, in a treasonous way against the country and President Trump. And I'm talking principally about Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, the Neville Chamberlain of our time, Larry Kudlow, the Lord Halifax of our time, to join the Neville Chamberlain, and Jared Kushner. And it was just a constant, exhausting battle to push forward a tough on China agenda, and these guys would push back in ways which were not appropriate. They engaged in bad process files, back channeling, and it was, at the end of the day, just wrong. But the biggest thing that got away from me, and it's featured prominently in the Taking Back Trump's America book, is the failure to get a beautiful executive order signed by President Trump that would have held communist China rightly accountable for the virus and the pandemic in a way which would have held them certainly financially responsible, as well as clearly identifying them as the source of the virus. And that was that one broke my heart, because I knew in my bones that the biggest thing the Democrats had attacking Trump was his perceived failure on the pandemic. They got the American people to blame Trump for the pandemic. And if we could only have shifted that blame where it rightly should have gone, both to communist China and, by the way, Anthony Fauci, I think it would have made all the difference in the world.
It's a very interesting point, because I think a lot of China watchers and yourself probably remember when the former president was on the podium, he would oftentimes kind of allude to that fact that he was going to. So you almost felt like that was coming, but it never did.
Well, he was always being pulled back, and the reason was this so-called skinny trade deal, which was an abomination in and of itself. I told the boss that it was a bad deal, and that even as bad as it was, the communists would never even abide by what there was in it, and that has turned out to be historically accurate. And so there was always this tension that Mnuchin, Kudlow, Kushner, at times even the trade rep Lighthizer, wanted to preserve that skinny deal, and therefore were afraid to take tough actions on China. Particularly this executive order, which would have held China accountable. And I was trying to explain to these people, and frankly, they're just politically naive. I mean, every single one of them had no understanding of this country. They were not of Main Street. They were not of the deplorable fabric. They were not of the 2016 campaign DNA that I shared with the boss. I'm only one of three people who was with the boss from the campaign all the way to the end. 3 senior advisors, the other 2, Stephen Miller and Dan Scavino. Everybody else, you know, they came and went. But I persevered, and the boss kept me because he knew I was the guy who best exemplified what he wanted to do.
I want to ask you, Peter, I'm sure you've already heard by now, many close people to the former president, most recently Mike Lindell, has been raided by the FBI. This is an unprecedented use of force. So many people, including yourself. Why do you think we're seeing this?
Yes, well, from my own story, as at least some of your viewers know, I was arrested at Reagan National Airport by 5 armed FBI agents. I was not a flight risk. I was being charged with a misdemeanor. The standard protocol for that is what's called a voluntary surrender. They call me or my lawyer, say, hey, we got an arrest warrant, just come on down to the court, we'll process it and get you out. No bail required, right? That's what they should have done. Instead, they grabbed me, they stuck me in leg irons, solitary confinement. They seem to be proud of this, the same cell that John Hinckley sat in when he shot Ronald Reagan. They didn't allow me to call an attorney, and it was an attempt at pure bullying and intimidation, and they leaked it to the press, by the way, while I sat there in solitary. And I wasn't surprised, sadly, because I was aware of the rot, and it is a rot, within the FBI going back to 2016. You have to remember the preemptive coup that was attempted against Donald Trump with the now fully discredited Russia hoax. That was Hillary Clinton's campaign working with James Comey, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, and others, maybe Brennan, maybe Clapper, in the what they call the IC, the intelligence community. And we saw the FBI's conduct with Roger Stone, Paul Manafort, George Papadopoulos. They took out Mike Flynn unfairly. And look, what they do, even if they can't put you in prison, they try to bankrupt you. I mean, I already have costs exceeding $400,000 for this. It's a misdemeanor. And you ask me what they're trying to do. They're trying to bully, intimidate, and ultimately build a criminal case against Donald Trump so he can't get back in office. That's why taking back Trump's America has become so much more important. Look, if this book were coming out now as it is, and the FBI wasn't trying to do what they are trying to do with President Trump, and the Department of Justice and Joe Biden's not giving speeches about how the deplorables are terrorists, this book wouldn't be as important as it is. But right now, it's so important that people read this and then act on it, because we can't afford this, Steve. We can't afford to live in a country where authoritarians and fascists are ruling the roost and using that power, ironically, to destroy our economy and our national security. I mean, that dog should not be allowed to hunt.
It sounds like what you're saying is it's a form of scare tactics, both for people like yourself that have been directly affected.
It's more than scare tactics. It's a way of canceling you. I mean, yeah, I'm not a wealthy man, right? I have a modest professor's pension. I'm retired now. If I have to spend $1 million on my defense, that's going to mean down the road in my golden years, they'll be more like, I don't know, brass or copper. They're not going to be that golden. And, it's like, but I'm standing up for the Constitution in this country and my commander-in-chief, and I'm prepared to go to prison because of that. because I think there's significant constitutional issues that the Supreme Court itself needs to settle if we can't settle them in the lower courts.
Peter Navarro, thank you so much.
Sir, appreciate it.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.